I'm Brian, a fourth semester master's student in history. Sounds scholarly, right? Wrong. I'm the guy who's perpetually distracted. Studying? Sure, but only after checking my phone, strumming my guitar, or daydreaming about my band's next gig. If procrastination were a sport, I'd have a shelf full of trophies. Now, this story takes place the night before my historical methods exam, an exam I desperately needed to pass. I'd left all the prep work until the last minute, naturally. At around 9 p.m., I made an earnest attempt to study. Books open, highlighter in hand, I was ready until my phone buzzed. Just a quick scroll, I told myself. One YouTube guitar tutorial later, my study session was derailed. Before I knew it, I was cradling my guitar, riffing like I was on stage at Wembley. The guitar, by the way, is the centerpiece of my room. It's always propped in the corner opposite my bed. First thing I see in the morning, last thing I see before I crash. That night, though, my sister had borrowed it for a school event and hadn't returned it. Still, out of habit, I glanced at its usual spot every so often, as if expecting it to magically reappear. Around 2 a.m., guilt caught up with me. I needed sleep, at least a few hours. I crawled into bed, but couldn't resist one last round of YouTube videos. I must have nodded off mid-scroll, because the next thing I remember was a sound. It wasn't loud, just subtle creaks, like an old rocking chair swaying slowly. Groggy, I tried to ignore it, but it persisted. The creaking had a rhythm, almost like footsteps. My eyes fluttered open, and I scanned the room. Everything looked normal at first, except for the corner where my guitar usually stood. There was something there, a shadowy outline. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. It looked like my guitar at first, but the neck was wrong, too thick, too long. The more I stared, the more I realized the creaking was growing louder. Then, as if someone had cranked up the tension, the noise twisted into something else. A high-pitched giggle. A woman's laugh, light and airy but unnervingly sharp, like glass shattering. My stomach churned. That's when it hit me. My guitar wasn't even in the room. My sister still had it. Whatever I was looking at wasn't my guitar. I wanted to turn my head, to look away, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen, paralyzed, save for my eyes. All I could do was stare at that shadowy figure. And then it moved. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the shape began to rise. What I had thought was the neck of my guitar stretched into the outline of a woman's head. Long, dark hair cascaded down, obscuring her face. She was crouched low in the corner, but she was standing now, taller and more menacing with each passing second. Fear gripped me like a vice. My mind raced, replaying every horror movie I'd ever watched. But as much as I wanted to scream, to thrash, to do something, I was trapped in my own skin. All I could do was lie there, helpless. And then, out of nowhere, I remembered the exam. The stupid historical methods exam. If I didn't pass, I'd be screwed. And here I was losing precious sleep because of whatever this was. The thought filled me with frustration. The fear that had paralyzed me started to crack under the weight of my anger. I was not going to let some shadowy ghost woman ruin my night. I summoned every ounce of willpower I had, and the first thing that escaped my mouth was a stream of cuss words. "Get the hell out of my room," I snarled. The words felt thick and sluggish, but they were out. I could feel control returning to my limbs. My fingers twitched, then my arms. Fueled by a cocktail of rage and adrenaline, I punched the wall beside my bed as hard as I could. The impact jarred my entire body, and just like that, the figure vanished. I bolted upright, drenched in sweat. My chest heaved as I scanned the room. The corner was empty. No figure. No laughter. Just silence. A minute later, my dad burst into the room, looking both concerned and annoyed. Apparently, my cussing and wall punching had woken him up. I told him everything, about the shadow, the laughter, the paralysis. He listened, nodding slowly, though I could tell he thought it was just a bad dream. "Maybe lay off the late-night videos," he said before heading back to bed. Since that night, I've never experienced sleep paralysis again. My friends joke that I scared the ghost away with my colorful vocabulary. Maybe they're right. Either way, I passed the exam, and I always tell people, if you ever find yourself frozen in fear, just get mad. Works like a charm. The following event happened in an Indian Army quarter located in the state of Uttarakhand. My late father, who was the commandant of a battalion of troops back then, was stationed in a residence which was an old building built sometime during the 1950s, an old two-story structure, meaning other families stayed in the same building. It was during our stay at the residence that we had witnessed several occurrences. Each room had chimneys in them. The army would supply us with coal in order to better compensate with the harsh winters of the region. The first of the occurrence was via these chimneys, as we'd hear slight whispers coming through them, but not audible enough to make out what was being said. My parents made nothing of it at first, saying it was merely the other family who resided below us, as their chimneys ran along our walls to the roof. However, their speculation would soon change, as the family were out on a vacation during the holidays, and the whispers still persisted. As my parents were devout Christians, they'd say otherwise. Soon enough the whispers started to fade out, and we no longer paid no heed to them. However, the house seemed to have other sinister plans. We started witnessing other occurrences and happenings. The house had a tin roof with tiled ceilings for insulation. We'd started hearing noises yet again, but now coming from the ceiling above the room, shared by me and my sister. The noises were often subtle, sounding almost like sacks being pulled across the surface, or someone crawling. As there was no way to investigate due to the lack of openings, we'd assume it to be birds who happened to have found refuge and built nests along the roofs, or maybe mice just stealing their eggs. Far-fetched, but better than thinking otherwise. However, our theory was soon shoved off when a repair crew was summoned to fix the roof because of leaks over certain parts. My sister and I would often climb up to the roof via a maintenance ladder for the panoramic view, unbeknownst to our parents, of course. Out of curiosity, we did the same during the repairs. This time, however, we were accompanied by Mum and our cousin along with our quarter guards. With the tin roof being removed, everyone seemed baffled, as there was hardly any traces of an infestation, let alone drag marks, except for a little piece of what seemed like a small blanket. Shortly after, we started hearing noises coming from the kitchen. The sounds, likely that of cutleries being toppled around on top of the furnace cooktop when no one was around. However, when we'd inspect, we'd find no traces as to the cause of the sounds. But oddly enough, whenever we were in the kitchen, we'd sense an eerie presence. My mother was the first to have witnessed one such happening when my father was out of station on duty. After she had undergone a kidney stone surgery a few months back, her routine medication order required her to take her medicines at specific hours, 2 a.m. being the last. She'd often take it along with a light snack and cup of a hot drink. On one such occasion, when she was up and about preparing herself a drink in the kitchen, she felt what seemed like a warm breath on the back of her neck. She turned around to see no one. A little unnerved, she finished preparing her drink and about to return to the bedroom, when through the corner of her eye, a glimpse of movement caught her attention. Once again, she looked around to see if it was maybe the cat that must have awoken, trying her best to make sense of it. As she closed the kitchen door, she saw a reflection of a dark figure at the corner of the room through the reflective glass panel of the kitchen door. Terrified at the sight, she dropped her glass and screamed out in fear. Startled by the noise, we woke up and rushed to see what was wrong, while the quarter guards rushed in from their quarters and immediately tended to my mother, who was now on the floor. After she had composed herself, she told us about what happened. Seeing that one of the dining room windows was slightly open, one of the quarter guards immediately rushed outside, checking every corner of the house for any signs of burglary, but to no avail. The windows had narrow gaps and were perfectly aligned with the guards' quarters, all the more making it unlikely for someone to have escaped without creating commotion, let alone in haste. After the incident, my mother refused to talk about it further. It was only years later, after we'd moved to a different place, that she started sharing about what really happened. This was especially strong at the small storeroom by the corner of the kitchen, a small room intended for storing rations and groceries. It was in this very room that my 19-year-old cousin also had witnessed something paranormal, because after my mother told us about her incident, my 19-year-old cousin too confessed that she also witnessed a dark, shadowy figure in the corner of that very room beside the door. Often, when we passed by the old quarter, we'd notice that it would be empty, but we cannot shake the feeling that someone or something is staring back at us.